So welcome everybody. I'm Chris Price. I'm the Director of Educational Development at the SUNY Center for Professional Development. Glad you could join us for this last FACT2 Task Group on Experiential Learning webinar on how to sustain multi-institution collaboration. So kind of turning to what's next after this group is done with its work. So here's the plan that we have for the session. I'm shortly going to turn it over to Mara and Ed, who are, in fact, the task group chairs, co-chairs, to welcome everybody. And then myself and a couple other colleagues from SUNY System Administration are going to just briefly describe some other efforts to foster collaboration and scale innovation across SUNY, just so we have something to work from as we think about how to do this with experiential learning. And then after we all give you that, I'll ask a few questions and invite you all to either participate in the chat or unmute yourself and share some answers to some questions about experiential learning, so we get a sense of what you're looking to do in your context on your campus with your courses and programs. And then finally, we're going to talk about some ideas for doing this multi-institution collaboration. Mara's got an idea that she wants to share with everybody. And then we'd also like to invite you to share ideas that you have for how we can continue this work into the future and get us working across the system, across SUNY campuses to support experiential learning. So with that said, I think I'm going to turn it over to Ed and Mara.
Thanks, Chris. The task group on experiential learning from curriculum to career was one of the two task groups that FACT2 took on this year, the other one being on AI and AI across the curriculum. Really happy to collaborate with everyone across SUNY and hear what everyone was doing. One of the advantages, one of the legs up that this task group had is that we weren't starting from zero by any stretch of the imagination. We had a long history in SUNY of both applied and experiential learning. We had definitions for applied and experiential learning that we could build upon. We had great work that was happening on all campuses. And so one of the things that became incumbent upon us as we did this kind of year-long collaboration and exploration was, and this is a lot of fun for me, was actually just highlighting a lot of the great work that's already happening on campus instead of kind of trying to start something from scratch. And so it's really excellent to have this opportunity to collaborate and build on many years of innovation, great teaching, great pedagogy, great engagement with community, whether that's, through service learning, which often tends to be more community-based engagement, or global learning with our extensive programs across SUNY. So I really enjoyed this year co-chairing this task group. And one of the things that I constantly think about is what's next? How do we sustain this? And having been around FACT2 and having been around SUNY for a few years, it becomes a concern of mine is like you get people together, you get the smartest people in SUNY collaborating and working together for a year during like a FACT2 task group like this one, and then what happens next? And so that's what we wanted to focus on in this dialogue and in this session was how do we sustain across SUNY what's going on, and it's really a challenging yet exciting topic for me is what comes next.
Thanks, Ed. I will just second that. I'm Mara Huber, and it's been a pleasure as well to co-chair this group. And this session is really what got me to the table, this question of how do we scale and how do we sustain. It has been clear from the beginning that we have amazing innovation happening at the local campus level. That's both a plus, but that's also perhaps a point of fragility, right? Because it is localized, and that means there is some variation on campuses, which translates into some access issues for students, right? And we're here to focus on the students. And so after inviting some of our colleagues to share, which we've been doing through this webinar series, and also the playbook, through listening to both, the opportunities and the challenges, I think now we have the responsibility as Ed said, to think together with leadership about how to sustain this, not how we were sustaining it in the past. And some of us were involved from the beginning with the Applied Learning Initiative, but how do we sustain this momentum as it's moving forward within the landscape that we find ourselves in? And we're delighted to have Chris moderating, which is wonderful. And he has a lot of resources that he brings. And we're delighted to have Ellen and Kim with us. So really excited, and we want to get started with the dialogue. So we'll leave it, turn it back over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Mara. Thanks, Ed. So the first person I thought of for this, and I think Mara had concurred with that. In fact, it was probably Mara who said we have to have Kim there. So we have Kim Scalzo here today. She's the Senior Associate Provost for Digital Innovation and Academic Services, aka DIAS, and includes SUNY Online, the Office of Library Services, Open Educational Resources, oversees Innovative Instruction Technology Grant Program. And so we invited Kim here to talk about the innovation ecosystem that she's been promoting as a way to scale good practices, good teaching and learning, innovative teaching and learning practices across the system. So I'll just pass it over to Kim.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Ed and Mara. I want to first of all say thank you to Ed and Mara for their willingness to co-chair this FACT2 task group. And I think what we're doing in this task group is, I'll illustrate in a second, kind of how we're leveraging our ecosystem to strengthen the impact of what we're doing in experiential learning. So, you know, I've been at SUNY now for over 15 years, and for all of that time have been kind of watching, observing, sometimes having responsibility for, and now in this role that I have with DIAS, really kind of feeling like I'm charged with how do we promote and support and sustain innovations related to teaching and learning with technology, and how do we do that at scale across SUNY? And so when I started thinking about how we might think about this, I went back to something that we had worked on probably now about 7 or 8 years ago, which was just identifying all of the things that we do at SUNY to support and promote innovation, and how are those things connected and or not, and what are the things that help us decide how we focus those activities. So take a step back. This is where we landed with the map of the innovative instruction ecosystem. And I'm going to start actually outside the ecosystem with, you know, there are forces driving change in higher education. And those forces are both forces that are external to SUNY, like artificial intelligence, the pandemic, changing demographics, changing needs of the workforce, right? All those things that are happening, the, changing in administrations at the federal level, changing in leadership at the state level, right? All of those things are happening outside of SUNY. And then you come into SUNY, and internal forces are things like, we have the chancellor has identified 4 pillars of priorities for SUNY. We have policies around electronic and information technology accessibility. We have, several years ago, had a really strong focus on applied learning and experiential learning. So things that are, tend to be priorities or initiatives at the system level that affect all of SUNY. We have a new PLA policy I'm looking at, Alan, an update to the PLA policy, right? So things that we do at SUNY that have impact on what we do and help us to think about how we prioritize the work that we do. Those forces often lead to pedagogical trends and challenges, right? So with an increase or the proliferation of AI, what does that mean for faculty in teaching and learning? And how do they think about what they're going to do, what students are going to do, right? With the changing in demographics, right? With the pandemic, impacts on things like student preparedness and retention. So those external and internal forces have impact on pedagogy and trends and challenges that we see in higher ed. oftentimes they lead to technological innovations, right? So there's new teaching and learning platforms that come out. There's new badging platforms for workforce development. So technological innovations sometimes support those pedagogical trends and challenges, sometimes create other pedagogical trends and challenges. So they kind of play together, but all of those things then come into and are things coming into our ecosystem. And one of the things that we're very fortunate at SUNY to be able to say is that we get to make investments in innovative instruction, in promoting innovation and teaching and learning with technology. And so we get to make decisions about where those investments are focused. And those investments can be money, they can be task forces, they can be people time, staff, organizations. We get to make investments. And so the innovation activities are a range of things, including IITG projects and other types of seed grants, like the OER impact grants. Then we have things that maybe are successful out of those. And I'm going to point to the IITG grant that Mara led 2 cycles ago. Mara, help me out here, right? Which was, really about, it was about experiential learning and being able to codify the skills that come out of those experiential learning opportunities and translate them for the workforce. That really led to, so now I'm going to go to scaling innovation projects, right? Us trying to think about how can we do that at scale across SUNY? And sometimes it's just funding, right? Sometimes we just fund a project, but sometimes we need a task group or a task force or a thought leader group to come together to really think about that and make recommendations about how we take it to scale. And that's what this FACT2 task group was about. So, if we think about these different things in our ecosystem, what they're doing is helping us build on those really great ideas that come out of the seed projects or the IITG projects and think about how we take them to scale and what may be needed in terms of formal structure or recommendations. Once we have something that we know we want to take to scale and we know how we want to do it, we have mechanisms for sustaining that at scale. And those are things like university-wide strategy. So we can say we have a strategy around applied learning, around quality in online education, around open educational resources. That's another activity, by the way, that we can show you how it flowed through our ecosystem. We also have formal university-wide policies and standards, things like PLA or electronic and information technology accessibility, or the OSCAR rubric for online course quality design, right? So formal university-wide policies and standards that we disseminate and share out across the system. We also have university-wide infrastructure, things like contracts, grants, shared services, ways that we enable campuses to, ways that we can support campus operations to be able to engage in that initiative or sustain that work at the campus level. We also have communities of practice, and we, across the DS orgs, talked about all the different communities of practice that we engage with. And it's an incredible amount of people and roles on the campuses that we are able to communicate with, to share information with, to engage when we're trying to build something and do something. And that's one of the mechanisms that we have for sustaining innovation at scale that I think we don't talk about enough. So those communities of practice are really important. And so that was a recent add to this section of mechanisms for sustaining innovations at scale. And then the final piece of this is when we make investments in the kinds of activities that we have and we get something that we're trying to sustain, how do we demonstrate the impact of those activities and that we actually accomplished the goal that we set out to, right? And so how do we demonstrate, particularly for funding investments, the return on investment, right? And so that's something that I would say, we are trying to do, thinking a little bit more intentionally about, and we have more work to do. And then I'm just going to point to, at the bottom of this chart, is what I consider to be our foundation for innovative instruction. So, and for the ecosystem. And it's what enables all the things above it to happen and supports it with things like grants and technology platforms, change leadership, which some of you know that I talk a lot about, dissemination, that community engagement, which I talked about. Professional development is a huge way that we promote, support, and sustain innovation. And then procurement and contracts I talked about, and governance. And the logos that you see across the bottom of the screen, if you can read them, are various university-wide offices, programs, services that play some role in supporting innovations in teaching and learning with technology. So I share this because for me, I'm a systems thinking kind of person, and it helps me to see how things fit into the overall picture and how they are connected. And what I have come, I think, to appreciate is that at SUNY, we're pretty lucky to have all of this at the system level. And when we connect it in the way that we do, we can have significant impact. And again, I'll point to Open Educational Resources as an example of something that started out even before IITG as an idea on a campus, but then became an IITG. There was a FACT2 task group. We did some other support to help scale that. And now we get $4 million a year annually from the state to sustain OER adoption and usage across SUNY. And by the way, we're hoping to be able to increase that someday. And with that $4 million, we're able to save SUNY students $16 million a year. So that's a 4-to-1, 1-to-4 ratio, which is pretty good. So I think that's probably, just one example of something that when you think about our ecosystem that we've been able to sustain by having a defined university-wide strategy. We have standards around this now in the way that we code OER courses and ask campuses to report on them. We have the university-wide structure of our platform that we support through Lumen Learning, and a huge community of practice that's engaged throughout the year in this. And so, again, that's just one example, but I think illustrates what we can do when we think intentionally about the various activities and how we connect them together. And so what I always like to end when I talk about the innovative instruction ecosystem with, kind of a challenge to all of you at the campus level. What is your ecosystem? What does it look like on your campus? And how can the work that we're doing at the system level support you? How can you tap into this as part of, input into your ecosystem, or how is what you do input into our ecosystem? Because it is not just what we do at the system level. The reality is that all the work happens at the campuses, right? With faculty and staff. And so you are part of this as well. And so, I just want to encourage you all to think about this and what this looks like in your sphere, in your environment, your campus, whatever makes sense for you. So I will stop there and turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks a lot, Kim. And so I see there's a little bit of activity in the chat. We definitely will save time in the second half of the webinar for folks to ask questions. So, but if you have questions for Kim and you want to get them out there now, please put them in the chat and we'll address them in the chat, or we'll bring them up later. But thank you, Kim. That was perfect. And I wanted to start with this sort of big picture point of view from a system perspective. And I think the ecosystem does the perfect job of that. The next thing I wanted to do was kind of zero in a little bit more on a specific area of innovation, and that is incorporating prior learning assessment and industry certifications in the curriculum. And Ellen Gambino is leading that effort and system. And so she has a few slides just to talk about some of the things that are innovative things that are going on in that space, involving working with the campuses to incorporate this into the curriculum. So Ellen, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. You can just take it back to the first slide there for a second. The original introductory slide. So as Kim referenced, we've recently in 2023 had a restructure of the SUNY policy on credit for prior learning, or PLA, CPL. And so I came on board to help bring that to scale across the system. Credit for prior learning, or PLA, has been happening on campuses for a very, very long time. And it includes everything from AP exams to industry certifications to portfolio assessment. And everyone was doing it differently and to different degrees and with different levels of expertise. And so I think my role has been to sort of bring together different campuses using different models to bring it to scale. So there are times when a community of practice is what works. There are times when it's a small group and times when it's a larger group. So Chris asked me to just talk about a couple of the different projects that are going on. So I'll just give you some examples and how different models might work in different situations. Okay, Chris, next slide. So one of the projects has been to work with the Department of Corrections to and a small group of community colleges to crosswalk vocational courses into credit courses so that formerly incarcerated individuals could get credit for the learning that happened while they were incarcerated. So this was a small group. One school in particular has taken the lead and is developing all the crosswalks, and then we'll be working with the other schools to customize it to their particular curriculum. Another opportunity has been, next slide, Chris. The fire science. We've been working with Department of Homeland Security, Office of Fire Protection, State Ed, CTE education, and we're talking about how to align the outcomes from fire protection into the various campus fire science programs. This is being led, it's more of a system led with system and DHSES and NICED, but working with the campuses to see how we can do that. So it's a somewhat different model than the previous one, but there's a lot of collaboration with the campuses. Another one is the work that we've been doing with police. Criminal justice. Many campuses within the SUNY system have criminal justice programs, and many of them have been working with local police academies, for instance, to provide credit. But what we're looking at here, and this is being led by a faculty member on one of the campuses from SUNY Canton. What we're looking at here is a series of crosswalks from the police academy curriculum. Different model than the other two, but another way to scale it so that we can get campuses across the system to have not the same crosswalk, but a standardized crosswalk, so that whatever is coming from the various police academies can be matched up to whatever criminal justice program a college might have. And the last one I want to talk about is a community of practice. SUNY is collaborating with Nash, Strata, and Google to pilot Grow with Google industry certificates. This is a very broad and deep collaboration that we have 11 state systems, and we're talking about how to embed Google certifications into crosswalks. And then within the larger national community of practice, we have our own SUNY community college, a community of practice that includes 11 campuses, and we're focusing on working together to create some consistency about how we, with quality of instructional design, embed those Google certifications into coursework. This same set of skills that embeds certifications into coursework is also the same set of skills that is used for offering credit for prior learning. And so the Center for Professional Development in Kim's DS group is delivering professional training, and we're providing support to the campuses in terms of Yeah, you can go on, Chris, in terms of technical support. And so this group of 11 campuses will be developing, we hope, the paradigms for not just Google certificates embedded in coursework, but how to embed industry certifications into credit courses. So this will be a model for not just, as I said, not just Google, but embedding industry certifications into coursework, which we think is an opportunity for all of us to provide an opportunity, as we say, not just for acquiring knowledge and skills, not just knowledge, but also acquiring skills. And so those are just a couple of the examples of the different models that we're using to scale opportunities for credit for prior learning across the system.
Thanks so much, Ellen. I really appreciated, I've been appreciating working with you because Ellen and I have been collaborating, as she just mentioned, on the Google Cert project, the Nash project. And, it's been exciting to see campuses engage with these certificates. And, the one thing that I wanted to highlight in the brief piece of what I do at the CPD kind of builds off of that, in that, when you're talking about communities of practice in any system or in any ecosystem, to use Kim's phrase, you are what the benefit of a community of practice is what also makes it a challenge. It is, a loosely knit coalition of people who do the same thing roughly. And I'm going to give you the definition of communities of practice, the Wenger-Trainor definition, and highlight that is the benefit, is that you have a great diversity of people doing the same thing with the same passions of interests. But also the challenge is that they're doing it in various different contexts, in various different ways, with a wide variety of resources. So it's a benefit and it's a strength. But, at System and the folks that you heard from today and the work that I do, what we try to do is leverage the positives of that. And the fact that SUNY has 64 campuses and a wide range of sectors is really when all is said and done, a strength. And it really allows us to kind of take different levers and apply them to the projects that we work on at the system level. So what we do at the CPD is really build everything based on communities of practice. There's only about 13, 14 of us who work at the CPD, so we can't do everything ourselves. We really rely on bringing together groups of people to plan within the system to plan our programs. So the only slide I have for you today is just I wanted to share with you our program development framework. And you'll see at the very beginning, whenever we notice that we guess that there's a professional development need in the system, the very first thing we do is we work with a representative body of the community of practice who have the relevant expertise to help meet that need. And that's, again, the very first thing we do is we go out there, and we just worked on an academic advisement certificate that just rolled out. So what we did was we asked folks at the four-year campuses, university centers, and the community colleges for folks who could serve on a committee to brainstorm the competencies that folks need to know and be able to do to be academic advisors on the campuses in a broad way, not just on one type of campus or another, but all campuses. So that was our target audience for this program. And then we work with them on a rationale. Why do we need this? Why does this work need to be done? Why are we offering this? Why can't we just go out and get something off the shelf from maybe a national organization? Sometimes that works. There are other associations, like in the case of academic advising, there's NACADA or NACADA, I'm not sure, I always forget which one it is, but who do this kind of work. But we decided we could do it more targeted and focused on the needs of SUNY students and more efficiently than going out elsewhere to get this type of professional development. So as I mentioned, what we do is we work with that representative body to determine the competencies and learning objectives for the program. And then we backwards design from there. We come up with usually courses, professional development courses that we offer at the CPD, and then what it would take to earn that credential it's a non-for-credit credential. It's a professional learning certificate that we offer in the form of a digital badge. But we try to make sure that folks get enough to know how to do that job, whatever it may be, without overburdening them. It's not meant to be a graduate program. It's meant to fit within their busy work lives. And then finally, we identify someone within that community to design and teach the program for us. And so we go right back to that community. So as you see, again, I wanted to bring this up because anything we do from this point forward to sustain the work of the experiential learning task group is going to rely on the communities of practice that exist within the SUNY innovative instruction ecosystem. And so what I want to do now, and again, if you have questions for Ellen, myself, or Kim, please put them in the chat and we could definitely get to them. I'm sure we'll have time at the end. What I want to do now is take a pause and just sort of ask you a few questions about experiential learning as we kind of shift in the second half of this session to thinking about how we can work with you, the experiential learning community of practice. You're here, so you're part of it, whether you like it or not, okay? So you could leave this session today and say, I'm part of the experiential learning community of practice in SUNY. So we want to know a little bit about what your thoughts are about experiential learning, and then we'll use that to jump into thinking about some ideas for doing this kind of work that we've been doing in other areas with experiential learning. So you could do this, you could raise your hand if you'd like, but there's quite a few people here, so I'm just expecting you to put a few things in the chat. So the very first question I have for you all is, what excites you about experiential learning? Like, what brought you here today? What brought you to the previous webinars? Like I said, I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds and give you all a chance to put something in the chat. Okay, for the sake of the recording, I'm going to read some of these out. Someone say it's connection to democracy engagement, and a rainbow second. I like that. It's how we learn most profoundly from doing. The connection to the NACE competencies and institutional learning outcomes. I know we've heard a lot about the NACE competencies, those career competencies that really are a lot of great campuses doing great work with the NACE competencies. Oneonta, I know you heard from Ed and the work they're doing in Oneonta. Opportunities for students to find their passion and or purpose. A couple seconds on that one from Mara. Thank you, Mara. It is best for students. It is added dimension that helps students. Enabling students to see the relevance of their coursework. Benefiting students gets them prepared for their career readiness and makes us better educators. And the great work that Mara is doing at UB. How it can be integrated in classes and curriculum, thinking beyond internships and research positions that are wonderful, perhaps don't have enough opportunities for all students. So Ed's talking about expanding the reach of experiential learning. I love that. An ability for campuses to use it to deliver interdisciplinary projects and for students to become engaged and connected to their learning. And practicing what was learned in community. I like that. Interested in innovative ways and thoughts about increasing involving community, collaboration, and student professional development. Creating a shift of maturity of our students when they gain responsibility of their own learning. Bridge to classroom education and career and workforce. All right. Learn resilience, self-efficacy, workplace readiness, and moving. And Robin says, in addition, moving innovations to scale is something I've been striving to achieve for a long time. I know, Robin. We miss you. I'm glad to see you, even though you're retired. So I'm just going to briefly summarize that. It sounds like what excites you all about experiential learning is this sort of, it makes learning real for students and community with others, and expands like what we consider education. I always love when I used to be the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Brockport, and sometimes people would say things like, the real world as opposed to what the classroom is, right? The classroom isn't the real world. It's sort of this artificial place. But, experiential learning, and this is just summarizing what you all said, it really does kind of do that thing where it obliterates that distinction. The classroom is the real world, and it really provides authentic opportunities for students to learn. So Thank you all. And I'm going to save this chat, by the way, so pass it on. I'm sure Ed and Mara will appreciate that when they do the report for the task group. Here's the second question. So we're going from what excites you, what makes you enthusiastic about all this, to thinking a little more practically. How does it connect to what you're doing in your courses and programs? How does it align? And I'll just take 30 seconds. All right, so the first comment I see there is related to putting one strong experiential learning activity into each course that you teach, right? That's always good. You got to start somewhere, right? To create more engaging and impactful learning activities and assessments, an opportunity to develop narratives and evidence of doing. It aligns by showing students connections from what they are learning to real life career skills. So right, that's another reason why I wanted Ellen to be here, because a lot of the work that she's doing directly relates to that, right? How are we making this connection between learning in the classroom and what you're going to do for a career? And all too often, those two things are seen as opposition, or at least like we have this tacit kind of like, okay, we recognize that all you students are not going to be professors and scholars, so I guess we gotta teach you about what you're going to do beyond your education. But really, that's I think, not the right way to look at it, right? How do we bring those two things closer together so that the passions that you have as a professor can be passed on to students in their careers? Someone talking about Cortland having the Cortland Applied Learning Democracy Engagement Fellows Professional Development Program and its Dragons for Democracy Institute. Sounds great. It's talking about faculty often worried about the time commitment, loss of control. All right. And it's about what we can make space for and for priorities. J, align with the professional accreditations organization standards and help students get hands-on real-world experiences. A lot of you teach in accredited departments and accredited disciplines, right? This is really super important. Giving students a chance to apply what they're learning in the course, right? Now, applied learning was the former label we gave this. I know some people still use it, but you're right, it is. It's sort of like, what's the point? I hear that all the time from students. Help students with retention of what they're learning, right? Makes it real for them. As a biochemist, so many things have been done that need to be practiced, as bridging mental development and what is done in the real world, right? Majority of what I teach is law, ethics, or higher ed pedagogy. Experiential learning aligns perfectly with all I do. Each of these topics is best learned through applying the theory and concepts to real situations, including global opportunities. Spoken like a political scientist, Jennifer, which I know you are. Hope both emphasize student-centered active engagement in real-world environments to build skills and knowledge across cultures. They connect along with evidence of alignment in practice. Good one. Authentic learning is a concept so necessary. And of course, COIL. I know we've heard a lot about COIL so far, and I hope those of you that have just learned about COIL this semester consider doing a COIL course at some point. One of the best experiential learning opportunities students can have. Involve students in real-time collaborative projects, case studies, or discussions with international peers. Makes learning come alive. All right, so I'm going to turn on to the final question I have here before I go over to Mara for her idea. And that is, and this is really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to scaling and partnering with other campuses, because as I said, partnership is essential for scaling because you all are bringing different things to the table. But first we need to know what you need, right? So that we can match you up with others who have what you need. And that's what I always see my role is at the system level is to do that, right? Is to make those matches, to identify where we have strengths and where we have needs and try to make those connections. So again, I'm just going to take a minute or 30 seconds to be quiet and let you think about what you need. All right, so I'm going to start with the first one I see, and that is a second person at the Galpin Institute for Civic Engagement. It always helps to have someone to help you with something like this, for sure. Time, people and time, right? Those are big needs we all have. More people to do this work and more time to do it. A structure of implementation, though, is also, there's these ideas of how you do it, right? Ideas for how to do it, and that's the second comment after that. A doable project ideas for business courses, and I know the playbook is really going to hopefully give you all lots of great ideas for doing this work. As biochemists, so many things have been done that need to be practiced. It's bridging mental development and what is done in the real world. Okay. Ideas, examples, and support through participating in COIL courses, SUNY COIL, and workshops like this. Okay, yeah. Professional development, we know, is going to be a big part of all this. So I'm guessing in the last, part of the webinar, we'll talk about professional development ideas, and certainly we can help with that, the CPD. Ellen saying, just as the case for credit for prior learning, I think a campuses can benefit from ideas and models within a shared community of practice. Yes. And that's when I was talking to Ed Mara about this session and planning for it, we were talking about how can we sustain this community of practice? How can we connect you all? How can we, make sure that you have opportunities like this beyond this webinar series? Administrative buy-in is needed, certainly, right? It's difficult to achieve. Yeah, right. Showing ROI. I mean, that's why I think Kim had that ROI piece as part of the ecosystem. And that's what administrative folks want to hear. Like, yeah, we're okay with investing in something if it's going to pay off for our students. Ways to reduce time strains, right? Let's make things a little bit more efficiently for individual faculty, not make it such a heavy burden or heavy lift to do this work. And hopefully, again, the playbook will help with that. But, ideas are good, but we also need people and resources. Expanding curricula to accommodate experiential learning, right? I know in the STEM disciplines that, the thing that you probably bump up against the most is the amount of things students need to learn, and you sort of weigh the time that it takes to do experiential learning. And I know probably not anybody here, but your colleagues are probably like, well, I just don't know if I have the time to do it because there's so much I have to learn, so much I have to teach. And if I do experiential learning, it's not going to pay off in terms of covering the content, right? All right. Thank you so much. I'm saving the chat right now. I'm saving it, or I don't know if I could save it. Okay, if you can make sure you save this chat. I think we can once we say it's saved to the cloud. So we'll get the
It
chat
will
when
be
it's
saved to the cloud. I'll
Yeah,
make sure you
sure.
have it, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to just pause a second and just see if anybody has anything they want to say, or maybe I'll just actually turn it over to Mara and let her talk about her great idea. All right, floor is yours.
Okay, let me unmute and just say that this is a really great opportunity. And just wanted to note an observation that the last question was the hardest. It's really easy to get excited about experiential learning, especially when you're engaged with it and you get to see how transformative it can be. But when you think about the how, we don't have a lot of accessible ideas. And I agree that collaboration is huge, but I also firmly believe that you need enough structure. You need a little bit of structure. And somebody noted that in the chat. And so as Kim mentioned, I have benefited from the SUNY innovation ecosystem even before an IITG grant. I got my first funding through a PIF grant for applied learning that got us started in developing the ELN model, if you're familiar with UB's Experiential Learning Network. And then the IITG to scale it even bigger and to open it up globally. And I know we have some of our global partners on this call. So I want to go big because this is an important opportunity. And I want to say that just with a little bit of structure, it is possible to open up opportunities and to think about it a little bit differently. So I'm going to go for it and just share an idea. It's an idea that could be implemented. It could be translated. It could be scaled. But it's the idea to take on a system approach to using problems as opportunities for project-based learning. We know project-based learning is the most transformative form of experiential learning, or maybe one of them. And project-based learning is even more impactful, and we have problems everywhere. So why not turn our problems into opportunities for projects? And so what I want to suggest to you is a SUNY-wide marketplace, a digital marketplace for project and problem-based learning tied to sustainable development goals, which are a great way to frame out innovation and opportunities to address the world's most pressing problems. Starting big, but again, localizing, which is something that we have talked about and heard about throughout this entire webinar series. This would give campuses and students an opportunity to sort of engage, but to do it at the local campus level. So if you look at the experiential learning model at UB, the project portal, it takes opportunities and then allows faculty to integrate projects within their classes or programs of study. And this is a similar concept where we could have big categories of problems and projects and even partners who want to engage, and then open it up to the campuses and to faculty to think about how they want to address those within classes. So we talked about course integration in one of our webinars. We talked about co-curricular and curricular, some of those examples that we discussed. So what could a system-wide marketplace do? It could be a point of entry for students. It could be a showcase for the partners that we have for the categories of innovation. And then it could also be a point of collective assessment. So one of the biggest frustrations I have had from the very beginning when I got involved with this is it's really hard to do good assessment of impact. And Kim mentioned this as well. Experiential learning is really powerful, but there isn't a lot that we can sort of point to. But if we had a system-wide marketplace, we could have students do some self-assessment at the beginning, and we could have them do some self-assessment at the end using Pearl, which is a framework that we use for assessment. Pearl stands for prepare, engage and add value, reflect and leverage. And so we could look at our collective impact, and we could showcase the projects that the students do in all of their beautiful diversity across campuses, across methodologies. So imagine that, having a place to sort of browse problems and think about opportunities and explore, and then a place to assess and showcase as well, which would be super exciting. If you could go to the next slide, I just sort of built this out a little bit to get you thinking about the possibilities. So the notion of deliverables. Experiential learning is powerful because we know it supports learning and skill development. That's what we focus on. But it produces outputs if we design it in a way that we can get those outputs, right? So access to experiential learning opportunities for all students. Imagine every single student being able to engage in addition to what campuses are already offering. So this is not replacing anything, right? This is building a layer of an expansive and dynamic layer of opportunities. The idea for curriculum aligned and integrated and co-curricular, because we want to be flexible and we want to meet students where they are. We know that all of these experiences are meaningful. So why would we constrain them, right? Why do we limit experiential learning? We should be encouraging it in its most varied forms. Imagine this, leveraging the system, but at the same time, encouraging and incentivizing individual campuses to customize and showcase, so that projects could be integrated within their courses. They could showcase their own partners. They can develop their own signature offerings. so that you're doing both. You're addressing access, but also supporting local innovation. And this idea of using a common framework so that we can get the benefits for assessment and research, and then showcase the outputs. You'll notice that I went ahead with a name, SUNY Solves. I love names, they inspire me. And imagine this idea of branding the fact that our students are solving problems, right? And really becoming innovators, practicing, developing skills. I think that's really exciting. I don't know if that's the last slide or if I had one more. Is that the last one?
Well, this is one more. Yeah, one more.
One
Keep
more.
it. Yeah.
Now I get to see what I wrote because I don't remember.
I think that, yeah, this is the last slide. Yeah.
All right, so the benefits, equity, which is something that we were trying to really talk about, this uneven distribution. And again, as Chris said, it really is about innovation at individual campuses. So how do you address equity of access, but at the same time still do that? All about workforce skills, because we know that project-based learning supports skill and competency development. At UB, we use the NACE competencies. We also can use value rubrics, really any competencies that are important. Again, getting a self-assessment at the beginning, having students set intentions, and then developing the narratives, right, about their experiences. Engaging partners. We have some partners on this call. I would give a shout out to our participants from Enugu, Nigeria, who are implementing this across the entire state, from basic education all the way up. And we do have a Spencer Vision Grant to do that work. And this idea of faculty development, sharing innovation, creating a community of practice, Chris, around the innovation and the ways that people are addressing this, and then connecting with some of these other global goals. Whether it's the right time for this, whether there's an appetite for this, I can't say, but I do want to show how just putting a little bit of a structure to create sort of a focus, a common focus, a platform with a common framework, what that could sort of give us in terms of both inspiring our innovation, but also allowing us to respond to changing needs and opportunities, and being able to feel our collective impact. That's the work we've been doing at UB through these opportunities funded by SUNY. And it was our hope from the very beginning that we could scale that and share that across the system. So I just wanted to share that possibility here for consideration.
Thank you, Mara. One of the things I really like about this, and last year when you presented at CIT the results of your IITG project, one of the things what made it memorable and what I like about this idea is that it really it focuses on student work and what students are doing. Like, so starting with the end in mind. So you really clearly showed what your students were doing using Pearl, and that to me is what I think other faculty are probably looking for when it comes to anything related to teaching and learning, right? They want to, the educational developers, the faculty developers, instructional designers, we all kind of get really nerded out with the nitty gritty and the how to, and obviously faculty need to know that, but they don't get excited about that, right? They get excited about what at the end can my students do, and how would that look? How can I compare that to what my students are doing? And maybe how can I get my students doing a similar thing that's more relevant for me? And so that's what I think something like this could hopefully help do. And that also can sustain a community, because, every class is different. So even if you do this once, it's never going to be the same, right? With your students, and your students are never the same. That's what makes education so great. So I really like this. There was some in the chat, ideas from Chris Erickson. There's some things going on at York University in Toronto that he found, or they found, similar. So I want to just point that out for you and invite Chris to speak if they'd like to. He'd like to. I don't see his pronouns right there. But anybody else? Questions for Mara? I mean, we have one slide left, and really the end is just ideas, proposals, talking about the playbook more. But this is it for this webinar series, but hopefully not it for talking about experiential learning across the system. So anybody who wants to talk, who wants to ask a question, and feel free to do it in the chat if you're feeling shy.
I'd like to highlight what Chris shared inside there, the second link that he shared about the sandbox model. Because when we're talking about doing experiential learning inside of classes, there's a lot of barriers to getting started with a faculty member. Do I have to curate my own relationship with an outside entity? A couple years ago, I nominated someone for the Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching, and they received it because of the work they'd been doing experiential learning in their class. But they were curating a relationship with someone in an outside industry, working with them, getting an authentic challenge to their students every year, having the students work on that challenge and report back. And it was a wonderful experience for their students, but it was a lot of work for that instructor to be able to curate that relationship. Now, we have people on our campus that are working with alumni. Geneseo shared through this FACT2 about the work that they're doing with their alumni, where they're connecting every single freshman to an alum to do an informational interview within their freshman year. Wonderful things are happening at scale, but what Mara's talking about here is simplifying a little bit so that there could be a menu that a faculty member can open up and say, yes, oh, here's something that would fit into my class, and I don't have to do the outreach and meet this person. I don't have to work through simplifying that idea, that nugget of idea, so that it is achievable with one semester, because many ideas, they start out, they're humongous. And you have to scale and simplify that into something that is achievable. And then you have to think about, how do you present that to a student? How is that made into a project-based framework of a class? These are the barriers that I hear faculty talking about when you say, like, geez, we should just do experiential learning. We all recognize the benefits. We all know that the end goal is worth going to, but it's those barriers in the middle. And so a proposal like Mara's with the SUNY Solves that seems to me to share a lot of characteristics with the Sandbox project, seems to share a lot of characteristics with the SUNY Global Commons project that was a successful project in the past, is that here's a curated list that you can engage with that takes out 4 steps of legwork so that you can start and focus on your students and the student experience. And I think that what we can do in SUNY to think about that would be really important. So I just want to give some kudos to people like Chris who are sharing in the chat. Kim and we were at the Public Good U conference, and we saw a very similar talk from the Cortland Entrepreneurship Center that was doing something very similar as a regional approach, and thinking about how we can take things like the Experiential Learning Network at Buffalo, or the SUNY Solves that would be serving to do a broader SUNY community, and make that available, I think would be really impactful.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. And there was a comment there earlier about how the faculty need professional development and different kinds of recognition and compensation to do the work. And that's, well, the professional development piece is where we come in at the CPD. And, what I always find best is to kind of not hold off, but have more iterative professional development, where professional development sort of follows where faculty are going and where they want to go. Instead of saying, here's what you need and we're going to give it to you, it's asking the question, well, what do you need and how would you like to get it? And that's, again, follows that community of practice approach. It is and we find when we do it that way, it's a lot more digestible, let's say, for faculty. It takes a little bit longer, I'll say that, right? And you may get to a place you thought you would get from the beginning, although often that isn't the case. But we certainly look forward to doing more in this space around supporting experiential learning among the faculty. And the different kinds of recognition and compensation certainly are, needed. I do find, though, that that's where the whole ROI piece comes in, figuring out okay, this is, one of the things that, again, struck me he keep going back to Mara's presentation at IITG is that, they collected data around this, right, Mara? And you found that the students who engaged in experiential learning were retained at higher levels, right? Am I getting that right?
Attention, and you can
Yeah,
tie it all to research questions, so it can be
right.
very robust data.
So not
Yeah.
only, right, are you retaining more students, but you can also, right, do research yourself, and you know, so, and that's, we know that's the coin of the realm, right? So that, you know, will get some faculty excited, but they need to be supported.
Yeah.
Chris, can I just chime in before I know we're a minute
Yep.
over time, but I just want to acknowledge that we have a new Vice Chancellor for Economic Development and Upward Mobility, and you know, some of this is on his radar screen, and so I think as we get the final report from the task group, which we'll be presenting to the provost, um, you know, we'll present at CIT, but then, you know, we'll also do a final report to the provost. I think we'll want to probably bring Chris in on that as well, because a lot of what you're talking about, I think, will be relevant for him and he'll be interested in.
Great. Ed, Mary, you want to have the last word and maybe mention that CIT session while you'll be reporting out?
Go
So
ahead, Ed.
one of the requirements of every FACT2 task group is that we're going to be at CIT. CIT is at SUNY Oneonta this year, so very happy to be part of the host campus. And I hope that some of you stop by and see our final report. We've been working on the playbook. I love how the playbook is coming together and the different the different submissions that have been included. It is not too late to submit. We are closing the second round tonight at May 1st. But one of the things that will be either strength or weakness of the playbook is how many people participate and from what disciplines and from what campuses. We know that experiential learning looks different from at the community college than it does at the comprehensives, than it does at the research institutions. And so as we come out with this, we're going to keep accepting proposals. We're going to keep adding to it. And that diversity that we continue to add is only going to make it stronger. So as you start to see version 1 and version 2 of the playbook come out, I really encourage you to look for what's missing and to continue to think about what we should continue to highlight across SUNY in the playbook, because that's the as we get more submissions from a broader group, that's what's going to be its real strength. So I'm really proud of what's happening so far. It's going to be an awesome resource, and I hope that it just keeps getting better.
Leave it at that. Thank you, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Hope to see you at CIT or another time.